everybody. This is such a great, great guest that I have. You can see him here. I have the amazing Marlon Bermudez, and we're going to have a great chat about the founder's path from spark to company. And he has built a new company and he has a lot of great things to help people with, not just the successes, but the pitfalls in growing an organization. And then a little lacing in of the story of how he started his company. And as always, we don't do major pitches on this. However, if I think something is pretty amazing, I'll tell you to drop something in the chat at the end of this. And yeah, welcome, Marlon.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, like I said, I tend to love to showcase all these great new companies that have been growing. And I love to know how, first of all, how you got into the organization that you started. I believe that you and your wife are a dynamic duo, but I know that there's more to this. So yeah, please share.
For me, it all started when I was rather in high school. In high school, I actually went to high school in Connecticut. I'm originally from Costa Rica, but I arrived to Connecticut when I was 14 years old. And high school was a little bit easier for me, meaning that the level of education in Costa Rica is a little bit more stringent. So math, for example, was a little bit easier for me to get started with. So I'm always up for the challenge. I like to grow. I like to learn. And I had a business right out of high school. So, and this business was helping small businesses with their computers, their servers. So that started my entrepreneurial journey. And then I was doing that for about 6 years. But then I got bored because there was so much
Of
that I was
course you
learning.
got bored because math was easy. I mean, come on. I mean, you're like this brilliant person, right?
Yeah. So I was getting all these degrees and certifications, and I knew I could do more. So then I ended up upgrading from having my own small business back in the day to working for an MSP, a managed services provider back in Connecticut. And I did that for about 10 years. So while I was there, I was the HIPAA security officer and just information security officer for them for about 9 of the 10 years. And I was helping the company with leadership, management, operations, growth, a little bit of everything. So I am very thankful for that company because they gave me the room to grow as much as I could. And to me, that was very, very empowering. So same thing happened over the years as I continued to grow and get more degrees and more certifications. I found myself a little bit restricted in what I could do. Because knowledge is power, that's a saying that we're all familiar with. But my definition is more of the application of knowledge is power. You could know anything you want, but unless you apply it, it's not very helpful.
Mhm.
And I was a little bit limited in terms of what knowledge I could apply to the clients. Organizationally, there's a lot I could apply for some of the clients too. But as I continued to get my master's degree in cybersecurity, I actually strategized, okay, let me write a book instead. So the book was a lot more work because it was a project that took a lot longer. But the idea was to contribute back to society. So that book I actually offer for free as a PDF on my website. And the idea is if anybody
Okay,
wants to
we
read the
can
book,
drop that down into the chat afterwards, right?
yeah. So
We
if
will.
anybody wants to take a look at that book and learn a little bit more about cybersecurity, they can do that. There is no bar to entry. Anybody can do that. And it doesn't cost me anything. So the idea of that project for my master's degree in cybersecurity was more of how can I contribute back to society? So I found a way of doing that. There is a written version of the book, but the idea with that written version is more of if somebody wants to order from Amazon, they can, but the idea is more of, hey, it's freely available, anybody can get it. So that was back in 2017 when I graduated with my master's in cybersecurity. Then I strategized, I opened an LLC in 2019, and I published the book under the LLC. So there is a lot that goes involved there. And that LLC is Marber Security LLC. So same LLC that I have today. I like Patrick Bet-David. He has a book called The Next 5 Moves. So there is a lot of books and a lot of knowledge that I like to subscribe to and learn from. So for me, it's always about 5, 10 years in the future that you're planning.
Yes.
So
I
we
100% agree. I don't know why people don't. I don't know why they say a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year, and I'm going, no, you got to have at least a 5 year. I mean, even if it's so far, yeah. So keep going. I love it.
Yeah. And that just reminded me, I saw an ad earlier today from Patrick Bet-David too about the life plan. And the first time I heard about Patrick Bet-David was during probably 2019, 2021 or so, when I learned, I was looking for a life audit. How do you even do something like that? And he has a little bit of education on that in some videos. So that was the first time I heard about him and what he does and, some of his teachings. So ever since I've been subscribing to his YouTube channel and looking at some of the books, there is a lot of books out there for Grant Cardone, and there is a lot of amazing growth opportunities for everyone.
Yeah.
So as I learned about that, then the question was, how can I grow in a way that I can fully implement all my skills? And
Sure.
it's not about cybersecurity. It's not just about sales, because I actually don't like sales. It's about how can you deliver the
Come
most
on.
value.
Wait. We got to stop on that. What? You don't like sales?
I don't. So first of all, I'm an introvert, right? So having your own company as an introvert, that was the biggest challenge that I had when I started my company. I went to quite a few Chamber of Commerce events back in Connecticut,
Uh-huh.
and I walked out halfway through one of them. And then I went home and I'm like, well, what am I doing? I cannot have a business if I'm just not learning how to connect with people. So I went online. And of course, me being a knowledge gathering person, I went online and found a book. It's called The Edge for Introverts and Network and something like that.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of it.
I read the book. I got a lot of lessons from that. And I incorporated that. So the reason I don't like sales is because I don't know if you've been to Costco recently. Once you buy whatever you have to buy, on your way out, they start bombarding you with tires, refrigerators, solar power, whatever you don't need, they bombard you with that. So it's not a bad thing. It's just that if you're not in the need for something and somebody's sending you an email or a text message or just knocking on your door, that's unsolicited type of advice or unsolicited type of offers, right? So I'm not a big fan of that in general. So what my wife and I have done, we've architected something different, something called the authenticity journey.
Uh-huh.
So our clients are in wealth management. Think of family offices, registered investment advisor firms, private equity, and so on. So what we're doing with the authenticity journey is more of a human capital forum. So it's not a podcast necessarily. It allows us to connect with individuals who are in wealth management and just have authentic conversations, not on the business side, but on the human side. What has been their experience? What's their wisdom that they can share with the next generation? And we actually brought that to a markets group conference in West Palm Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, actually, last month. And it was very well received. We already have a lot of clips and videos online for that too. And that's part of the roadmap to continue exploring that and having live events too. But that's all about connection, building authentic relationships, not selling anything, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean there's so much to digest. I know Robert Kiyosaki, he had a marketer at one point who no, it was a book author at one point who was taking one of his courses and they were like, "Man, this is a great course. So, what should I do next?" And he said, "Go take a sales course." And I I think so a lot of times when we talk about not liking sales, what we don't like is we don't like pushy, shovey people or organizations. Then and how do I impact this? People buy for their reasons.
Yep.
That's it. They buy for their reasons. And if you don't, as an entrepreneur, learn how they buy, I don't care who you're selling to, you have to have sales. So, however, you work that sales apparatus through, whether that's referrals, whether you have, meetings, or whether that is them coming to you, and if your brand is big enough for them to come to you, great. all of those things. The thing that people don't like is they don't like to be treated as not genuine, not
Mhm.
human. And at the same token, when Daniel Pink in his book To Sell is Human came out, I remember thinking about his concepts in that, because sales is a four-letter word. In fact, salespeople will quite often say that they are at the if you asked them in the profession, what is where would they rank their profession from doctor to whatever, and it went through all these professions. The bulk of them rank themselves as bottom feeders. And yet, 1 out of 8 jobs are sales jobs,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
hardly any are actually qualified to sell. So it gets this kind of bizarre bad rap because the definition is to solve a need and a challenge. So you're right. If you're pushing a bunch of crap on people, here's my Amazon card, here I get my email, here I get this, here's this next product, here's this, all this kind of stuff. And I don't need that. I don't need it clogging up my email. You're not really solving a need and a challenge. And really, that is the demand gen from a marketing apparatus. Yet marketing never gets the bad rap, right? It's
Oh,
like,
that's true.
okay, never gets a bad rap. So the authenticity portion of it is genuineness, and what you're creating is a genuine environment to pass that wisdom. So your definition of the practical application of knowledge is the definition of wisdom. So you can be the smartest person in the room, but because you can't apply that, it's the you're the dumbest person as far as EQ goes, right? And as far
Yep.
as IQ goes. And so I love what you're creating, because that authenticity puts you in a place of comfort, especially as an introvert, to be able to say, I can solve a need and a challenge, but I am not going to force you to solve the need and the challenge. You have come to an environment where we can have great dialogue and great conversations. And I love that. So you had your first meeting and it went really, really well. And so what was one of the went really well? What was the success? What did you kind of measure the success of that with? Because I know that you're mathematical, so you got to have had some kind of measurement on that.
Are we talking about on the cybersecurity side or on the authenticity journey side? Because
The
they're two.
authenticity journey
Okay.
side of the fence, because that's what we left off on before I
Yes.
started my big, long, trying to summarize what you were talking about, right? So, yeah.
So for the authenticity journey, what we do interviews. Some of them are very short, some of them are cinematic, and it's more about uncovering the story of the human behind generational wealth. So they could be very successful, they could be the CEO, they could be a managing partner. We're interested more in their journey, their human story.
Sure.
And the outcome of all the podcasts that we've done, the interviews, has been a very well communicated. It just feels very refreshing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
We all have a great time. It's not scripted at all. We start with some simple questions and then it's free flow after that. And the last one that we did, for example, our guest ended up talking about dancing, how he is not really, really well versed in dancing, and how he would do that. And we were able to connect on that too, because we were taking dance lessons last year, and plenty of
Fun.
times, yeah, plenty of times during the dance class, I just kept looking at the door, and like my instinct was to just run for the hills, basically. But for me, growth is outside of the comfort zone. So basically, I stay there, and I learn a little bit more about dancing, and that's part of a challenge for me. I'm a very analytical person, so dancing doesn't come naturally at all. So
Wow.
then I had to learn a little bit more. So we were able to bond on that and a couple of other things. So it's always fun. You never know what to expect. And because our clients are in wealth management, sometimes you have to edit things. out depending on what they say, but it's never about financial advice or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it's just fun conversations, basically.
So it's just fulfilling for you right now. And
Exactly, yes.
absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And I love that the story about the dancing and so my best friend when I was living in the Cayman Islands, she was a professional global dancer.
Oh, nice.
And so when we would go salsa, we'd do all of this other stuff. It looked like Dancing with the Stars because she was out lifts, her husband would do lifts, and it cracked us up. And my husband hates dance.
I can
And
identify
he's
with that.
like, he got her, she got him out there, and he's like, it was one time that I actually even maybe considered taking a dance lesson. I thought that was so funny because it's true. Many don't know that. Some do know this if they've listened to the podcast, but I sing opera for 18 years and coached it. And the
Oh,
reason I liked opera over some of the extemporaneous music was because I understood it from a mathematical standpoint. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you think about music, music is mathematical. And so I could comprehend it very well. And then I could add the artistic over top of the mechanics of the mathematical stuff. But sometimes it doesn't translate into the dancing part. You have to
not all the
actually
time, no.
you have to actually feel it. All right. So now on the cyber side of the fence, let's get into some of the cyber side of the fence. You got a little bored on some things that you were working through, and I could I could see that. My dad jumped out of an airplane and he goes, it was great for about 30 seconds and then it was boring after that. So
Oh,
a lot of times when you're somebody who just you're craving all that knowledge and the application of it and everything, it does boil down to a little bit of a science, with the exception of maybe um, now. And I was just doing a market readiness with another organization, one of my clients. Now many are under appreciating um, the AI component of putting organizations at risk. So we think about third-party vendor risk, right? Think about that. Okay. So third-party vendor risk, you got Target. Target gets hacked. Why did they get hacked? Because of an HVAC vendor. Now you've got something that is tantamount to a 2-year-old unleashed and have employees that can't quit clicking on even fishing expeditions, let alone now you've got a 2-year-old guiding, or as Lothar Dieterman, I think it was Lothar Dieterman that said, um, actually, I got to look that quote up right now. Lothar Dieterman, AI is being deployed like experimental medicine without FDA approval or side effect studies.
side effects, yeah. And that's part of the challenge where we're seeing clients, prospects, and just the industry in general using AI in different capacity.
Yeah.
Some of them are trying to figure out how to use free AI tools that are available to them. Other ones decide to buy AI platform and more restrictively say to their employees, hey, this is the only type of stuff that you can use.
Sure.
Anything else, we're going to automatically block. So that's a little bit better.
Yeah.
But the challenge is the long-term
A little
implications
bit
of
better. Samsung just had a problem.
a little bit better. Well, I say a little bit better because even if you're using Microsoft Copilot, there was just an article in the past few days
Yes.
how they could expose data. So you could be using the full suite of Microsoft Copilot, and this is not just an issue with them in the long term, but you're putting data into an unknown box basically. So it's helpful, but what are the long term implications? I guess we're all going to find out soon. So
So how do you help your wealth management people understand that? Because it is as simple. I mean, we had a focus group on it because one of my clients is going to market with AI policy. And in all reality, there's several buckets. There's build bucket and there's use bucket.
Yep.
And organiza organizations have employees, and employees are human, and humans are notorious for not following policies. They are also notorious. I mean, think of all the tools that we create to stop people from doing things, and they still do it, right? So, I mean, it's like,
Exactly.
and so here we are, day in the life. I'm going to do a workflow with ChatGPT. I'm going to feed all this in, even if I don't do an agent, I feed it all in. Off we go. Revenue generating team, we're going to go ahead and use salesforce.com, or we're going to use whatever CRM they're going to use. And they enter in certain information. Doesn't matter if it's for the Department of Defense or if it's for selling into the grocery store next door. It doesn't really matter. They enter data in about that, and they're talking online with these agents that are exposing endpoint, but also in somebody else's server. Um, you know, marketers, you know, and websites capturing information, all this great
Yep.
stuff. What could go wrong?
A lot of stuff. And so with that, we've seen a lot of managers, just people in leadership in general, who work for either small or large companies, where the companies have done the first step. They've have an AI acceptable use policy. So at least they're saying, hey, we're going to give you Microsoft Copilot. You're not allowed to use anything else other than Microsoft Copilot. They go ahead and block everything else. So that's a really good approach. The challenge is, in personal conversations that I've had with, several individuals, they complain, specifically, they complain that their version of Microsoft Copilot that they're being given by this enterprise is very restrictive.
Oh,
Is not
yeah,
as
because it's
is not
not.
as yeah, is not as helpful to them as ChatGPT or other AI. So what do you do when your organization, as an end user, what do you do when your organization is blocking all the good stuff that's actually helping you to do stuff? And it's not allowed by policy at the organizational level. Well, there is a loophole, right? So more enterprise organizations can actually say, well, you're only going to use Copilot from Microsoft, but only from our account. What's that mean? An individual, if the company doesn't, is just allowing Microsoft to open a different window incognito, logging into their own Office 365 account, if they had one, and then using an unrestricted Copilot. Nothing unless the organization is blocking all other Office 365 tenants except for their own. So that's an easy loophole that organizations need to look into, because you could block everything else, but then you're still allowing Microsoft. It has to be restricted just for their specific account. So that's an example of things to look out for.
So let's look a little deeper too with it, right? Because it's that's one example. You have CRMs that are pinging. You have with HubSpot, you have Breeze, you have all these agents that are running on top of, several of the LLMs. And at the end of all of it, um, I think it's even more complicated, at least for me anyways. It's a little more complicated because they have to use that for build, maybe for build, but a
Yep.
lot of times for the rev side of the fence, they get a pass because they don't even think of the organizations don't even think about that. Oh, you can only use Copilot. Well, okay, great. So here you go, Microsoft Dynamics, because you're talking Microsoft products, right? Here you go. All the third-party integrations within that. All of also thinking about all of the um, marketing tools in the shadow. Let's talk about shadow IT
Shadow
that you
IT,
don't even
Shadow
know that
AI.
they're using. You're locking it down, but yeah.
Yep. That's where technologies like DNS filtering come into place that are very, very helpful. And you'll be surprised how many organizations don't actually have that. And it's not that
Oh, I
expensive,
would
but
not
it's
be surprised.
it's essential to have that. Um, you could have a lot of different things protecting the organization, but the moment that laptop leaves the organization, then unless you have a lot of security like DNS filtering and other technologies, you're not going to know what individuals are doing outside of the network, and they could just be traveling. So the challenge with that is that there is the issue of potential data loss. There is a lot of data exfiltration that could happen, not in an intentional way, but potentially accidentally too. If the laptop gets lost or stolen, that's another issue. But shadow IT, has always been a big issue, because if an end user goes to their manager and say, "Hey, I need this to do my job," if the manager never acts on that and submits a request, or the solution doesn't arrive, they're going to come up with some sort of creative way to solve that issue.
Humans, creative ways. Yeah, that's the
Yep.
crazy part of it. So let's bring it full circle to basically this is the founder's path from spark to company. And we talk about some of the pitfalls, but we talk about some of the successes. And of course, this first round, this first season is based on a little bit on IT related things that founders should probably watch out for, because not just watch out for, but some of the successes. So what I really love about what you said about some of the successes is that you have authenticity in the mix. You've identified that, gosh, I'm an introvert and it drains me. Sales drains me, and I don't like that portion of it. So learning what your superpowers are within that and figuring out how you're going to work around that. And you've started this fabulous podcast for the authenticity journey, and we'll put a hashtag on that, right? Because we want people to follow your podcast and those things. Then we've brought it to some of the pitfalls that maybe these founders haven't thought about within their IT realm. I bring in AI. I brought in AI, the subject of AI, because it's a hot topic, but I think it's a very underappreciated topic. And you have gone through several things that have helped them say, okay, well, you got to do this, you got to do this. These are simple things. The reason I bring that to the forefront is if you are hacked, you won't have a company if you're starting up to begin with, because it's over. It's game over. And a lot of times, founders underappreciate the level of effort it takes to ensure, one, that they're using the correct technologies, not just, to not chase shiny objects, but to also make sure that they're seeing things in a light of blocking their growth if they don't do certain things with IT, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, cyber risk is something very underappreciated. Here, we're going to put a tool up. There's cybersecurity. It's secure, right? No, you got to have a roadmap, right? There's a risk out there inherent to your reputation, to your revenue generation, to your even to the health and wealth of your internal organization, as well as the external customers that you have that you are a steward for. So I love that you've made those suggestions. So what other suggestions would you make for these founders that are trying to make sure that they cross their T's, dot their I's, and that they are using wisdom to grow their companies?
I have a couple of things. For me, the most important thing in business is integrity. So that's why core values is one of the first things that I already had in my head, everything that I wanted to do. But from the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, which is one of the many approaches out there,
Yeah.
I like to make sure that there is core values embedded into everything that I'm doing. On the personal life, on the professional life, even the authenticity journey has its own separate set of core values.
Sure.
But our first core value is integrity. And when clients or prospects ask me what's different about you and your company, of course, I can explain a lot of different things, but one of my answers often is I cannot be bought. So I don't like the conflict of interest, so I eliminate that at all costs. So for example, we have a family office client who's looking for another MSP, and I'm helping them navigate that, even though the other MSP also does not the same, but similar things to what we do. But for me, the conflict of interest gets removed automatically. So I have a fiduciary responsibility with my clients.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by integrity and that we cannot be bought. So cybersecurity is not a product, it's more of a service. You cannot just deploy a whole bunch of tools and just make it work. It just doesn't work like that. So I would say, just to bring it back in full circle, is just make sure you have core values that align with what you're doing, with your personality and your industry and your clients. A lot of organizations have not thought about the ideal client profile, and that's just marketing and branding. But basically, my definition of the ideal client profile is who are you bringing your best value to? That's my definition of that.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect is, in my experience, networking events are very helpful, but it's even more helpful when you don't make it transactional. We actually have a video about that, about building with intention and attention, meaning that if you go to a networking event, it's not about how can they help me, it's more about how can I bring value to the community. Whether you make introductions between your networks,
Sure.
you try to help others. Basically, that's the best approach that I found that helps us the most. Helping others not only feels good, but it just brings value to everyone involved. So
Serve
for me,
first.
yep, to me, it's not about transactional business card exchange, because that doesn't do anything. You go to a networking event, you get 20 business cards. There was a 5-minute conversation. You didn't build anything of depth. You didn't build anything of value. But
Oh,
if
you
you,
can't because there
yeah,
isn't any value. It's a business card. Yeah.
yep. So if you take the time and find a few people that you really related to,
Sure.
regardless whether you can do business with them or not, that you really related to, that you could say, huh, I could see myself having coffee with this person.
Yeah.
Then you could do that. And referrals, depending on the line of business, could always bring you a lot of future opportunities, but it's not about that either. It's more about the human connection for me. And for the business that we're in, it's not a transactional thing. It's more about relationship building, and that takes a long time. Um, Integrity, actually, that reminded me of something. A while back, while I was living in Connecticut, we moved to West Palm Beach in January of 2024. So we're fresh to the Sunshine State. Uh,
I wish I was in that sunshine state. I'm a heavy scuba diver, so
nice. So while we were living in Connecticut, someone told me that I'm going to have to bend my integrity to be able to make it in business. And
no.
like I said before, integrity and all of the core values, that to me is not, it's a deal breaker. I'm not going to change any of that. So there is a difference on how different individuals with different approaches in life do. If you have a business that's not integrity oriented, and I keep talking about that one because it's my first core value specifically, then you lose trust, you lose credibility, you lose everything that you're building over time. And it could be just one block at a time, but eventually it deteriorates.
Right.
So for me, the best advice that I can give everyone would be lead with integrity and authenticity. And authenticity is more about building authentic relationships with others, regardless of whether you could do business with them or not.
I love that. It's why I don't like the word discount because it
Yeah.
implies to me that I didn't give you the best value from the get-go, which questions my
Yeah.
integrity. And when I've coached, it doesn't matter if it's marketing, what's the discount, or if it's a salesperson, or if it's, customer success, or whoever it is going to be. I've had teams come back and say, well, what's my range for discount? And I said, well, you said the D word. And the D word is not a word we discuss. First of all, if somebody is saying, well, we really like a discount, it's like, well, that's like you just go ahead and turn around and say, that's like saying that I was taking you for granted and didn't give you the best price to begin with.
Yeah.
So I am not Walmart where it's every other day sale. I am not Amazon where it's like today we're getting this. If I've given you a quote, that is the quote at the time. That is the best value. And so that's why I hate the D word. They'll say that. And I'm a huge fan. Everybody always knows this. And someday I'll meet him, but I can't pay his price tag right now. But Chris Voss, I am
Yeah.
Chris Vossian to the core, right? And I'm like, oh,
Nice.
I just love, Never Split the Difference. And
I
I
love that
just
book. I read it twice.
Oh, I've probably actually read it 24, 25 times, and I've actually
Nice.
done workshops based on it, but you know, anyways, and there's others that kind of have fed into it because believe it or not, Chris Voss follows Jim Kemp, who is one of the granddaddies of the no system, obviously, which is a sales system. And
Yep.
I always liked him and old Zig Ziglar because Zig Ziglar was all about integrity and value. It's like, dude, if this is not a value to you, then it's not going to happen. He just did it pretty evangelistic, you know. He's kind of
Yep.
like that preacher that gets up there, and I kind of laugh at that. But I always with Chris Voss, you know, it's kind of like you're not going to split the difference. So if somebody asks you for a discount, they're basically asking you this question, and I would consider this. I want to take advantage of you, so can you give me a lesser price?
Yep. I can see that.
That's Chris Voss, right? I mean,
Yep.
never split the difference. I don't mind giving a complimentary session if it is if that is what you absolutely need. Maybe I get a testimonial from the complimentary session, or
Yep.
maybe I don't. Maybe it's a serve first mentality, but I don't want to feel like I gave you something and it's sleazy and cheesy because you thought you got something over on top of me. And the same thing the other direction. I would never want to say, well, I'm going to quote you this, but I built in 5% because I'm going to discount it later, you know,
Yep.
whatever. That's just gross. So I love that. You brought up EOS, you brought up integrity, you brought up having those core values, even on your authenticity and journey podcast, and what you're willing to do and what would cross that line. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give the amazing plug for Marlon. You want it straight up, and you want what that is. You're not going to have games played with Marlon. So reach out to him, give him some love, and let him know what works and what your challenges are, especially either in the MSP side of the fence, in the cyber risk, CISO, whatever, CISO, whichever one you want to kind of say. And obviously, maybe join him on his authenticity
The authenticity
journey.
journey.
I can't seem to say it over and over again, like 10 times. Let's say it backwards and forwards, right? So, anyways, yeah, drop some love down in this podcast. And Marlon, where can they reach you?
Well, there are a couple of ways, but they can reach us at marbersecurity.com, and I can send you the website for that.
We'll drop it down in the notes as well, but I always
Yep.
like people to hear it, and
And I
we'll
had two
also
pieces.
go ahead.
Sorry, I had two pieces of advice. You asked me earlier for earlier founders, so I had two things that I just remember.
Okay.
So,
So we're doing an addendum. This is a
yeah,
PS to the pot. Here we go.
PS. So you were mentioning about the difference in price. I like to live my life in alignment. So alignment on the personal side and on business side. So not everyone is your customer. So that means that if your price is X, then you have a customer that aligns with that price and the value that you deliver. There might be other people that charge more or less and they deliver different value. But at the end of the day, it's about value delivery and just alignment in general. So alignment is a really big thing for us. And then the other thing that kept being in my brain, even a few years before I started the company completely, was stop playing small. So that got ingrained in my brain for many, many years. And most people don't want to pursue entrepreneurship because of fear of uncertainty. And that's exactly what entrepreneurship is. You could have the biggest plan that you could have a 5, 10, 20-year plan. Those are all projections. At the end of the day, you need to have a really solid plan, but then have ways to support that too. So if you have something in your brain saying stop playing small, maybe you're boring, whatever you're doing, maybe you're not growing, whatever that might be, growth is outside of the comfort zone. And basically that might be where you need to venture into.
Well, that summarizes it all, the amazing Marlon here. And I'm so grateful that I always say that people bless my path. Marlon, you have definitely done that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Give us some love and see you next time.
Thank you, Valerie.